Okay. Well, good afternoon to everybody who's here today and anybody that may be watching this a little bit later on. Um, Today, we are presenting statewide and local data specifically for Macon County. My name is Matthew Otero, and I am the Senior Director of Data with tnAchieves. We are doing these virtual webinars for all of the 90 counties that we are the partnering organization for. So we are right in the midst of doing 90 of these. And the reasons why we are doing this is to not only share this data, but also because when Tennessee Promise, which is the scholarship that tnAchieves is partnered with, went into creation in 2015, legislation stated that there would be a local advisory council that would be appointed, and those people would provide guidance, feedback, and just a layer of accountability for us, the organization that is working with the students in that particular county. So that is the reason why we are hosting these Zoom webinars this year. In the past, we've usually done these in person, where we would travel across to each county in the state. But obviously, with the past year and a half or so, it makes things like going to in-person meetings a little bit difficult. And so we have moved to Zoom for this at least go around, but we usually do these every couple of years. As you may have noticed when you jumped on, that you have the ability to have your camera on, your microphone on. That's totally by default. At any point throughout this process, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me. Or if you'd like to wait till the end, that is also totally fine as well. But after we've gone through all that stuff, we'll jump in. But before we jump into some of the specific data numbers, we'll talk a little bit about tnAchieves and what it is exactly. tnAchieves, as a quick reminder, is a privately funded nonprofit 501c3 that is the partnering organization for 90 of the 95 counties in Tennessee. That means that we are responsible for the communication with all students and parents who have applied for the scholarship as a high school senior, as well as working with students who maintain Promise eligibility while they are college students. The same goes for our responsibility as a recruitment of volunteer mentors. And so, as you can see on this slide, since 2008, when we started, we've worked with over 440,000 students. We recruited over 71,000 volunteer mentors. And throughout that time, we've worked with over 600 high schools in the counties that we serve. And we've worked with 67 eligible post-secondary institutions as well. Just to make note, you'll see on that map that there are 5 counties that are grayed out. Those counties are served by the Ayers Foundation when it comes to the Tennessee Promise Partnering Organization. This slide here is to kind of give you a brief little introduction into what are some of the components that tnAchieves is doing as a partnering organization. The top ones are ones that have been with our organizations since before Tennessee Promise even began, whereas the 2 bottom ones are some of our newer initiatives that we have focused on heavily to work on college preparedness for students as well as for college retention. And so I'll briefly just go into each of those so that everyone has an idea. You'll see the big Tennessee Promise logo. That's there to represent the last dollar scholarship. The last dollar scholarship is kind of usually what's most advertised to students and parents because it's telling students and parents that they will have the opportunity to pursue a post-secondary education if they so choose by simply applying for Promise, meeting the requirements, and they know that if they go to one of those participating institutions, they will have their tuition and mandatory fees covered in some capacity. And that's been a component of tnAchieves since we were a private organization before Tennessee Promise. And so that's still here today. It's still one of our most prominent components. The other 2 that you'll see on the top line are those dealing with the volunteer mentors, as well as those with the community service requirement. Those 2 components have also been with tnAchieves since 2008. And the reason being is we know that financial aid is a big barrier for students, but it's not the only barrier that students will encounter as they're transitioning or while they're in college. And so by recruiting a volunteer mentor in every county that we serve, we're then able to pair up a student with those mentors, and meaning that they'll have an additional resource, encourager that they can turn to as they're making the transition from being a high school senior to a college freshman. In addition to the volunteer mentors, we also require students to do community service. And the reason why that has been the case since before when we were a private organization is because it's important to give back. These students, from different ways, different paths, they've gotten to this particular point of being able to go to school because of the community that they've grown up in, because of the teachers that they've worked with, the different organizations that maybe have helped or supported them. And so it's important they're also giving back since they have this opportunity. So before every semester, Tennessee Promise eligible students must complete 8 or more hours to remain eligible. We'll talk a little bit more about what those hours have added up to in a couple slides. The last things I will mention are those 2 or newer initiatives down below. Those involve the summer programs, which are our Summer Bridge programs and Summer Institute programs, as well as our complete program for students across the state. To give you a little bit of background on those summer programs, these are for students typically that are going to be more at risk and students that are a little bit more behind maybe when it comes to college preparedness. Students that take part in our programs usually are those that would be starting in learning support classes at their local school. And although those schools are totally paid for by Tennessee Promise and there's nothing wrong with taking them, it can set a student back a little bit. And so the goal of the summer programs is to not only get a student initiated on campus and get them comfortable, but also give them the opportunity to test out of those learning support classes. Summer Bridge program, which was done also online as well as in person this past summer, is a 3-week program versus the Summer Institute program, which is only currently being held in Memphis, is a 6 to 10-week program. The 2 big differences and the similarities are that both programs are focusing on the English, math, and reading sort of preparedness for students, and they're both testing on those. The differences are at the end of the Summer Bridge program, students get a chance to test out of those classes versus the Summer Institute program, students are getting to only test out and earn college credits at the same time. The group of both of those students are typically minority students or students that have come from low income backgrounds. And so, like I said before, these are our most at-risk students. But both have shown promise, both have shown success rates. Our Bridge program students had an 89% success rate this past year, which meant that they were either testing out of their classes or were improving. Whereas our Summer Institute classes, we had 100% success where every student passed their classes and earned college credit hours. So some of the initiatives that we have been working on in the past couple of years. In addition to that, you saw the Complete logo there. The Complete program is a statewide program where every student, regardless of what county they're in, if they are a low-income student, they're going to be housed with one of our Complete coaches. So we have currently 18 coaches on staff, and each coach is working with those students, checking in with them on a week to monthly basis. And they're sort of taking the baton from the volunteer mentor. They're working with them to make sure that they are indeed at the school that they're going to, that if they have any questions, they can get those answered, and just kind of getting to know them on a personal level, because we know that beyond academics, school is very much a social sort of thing as well. So we'll jump into some more information about that, but let's get into some of the numbers. Tennessee Achieves has a wide reach. So this is kind of reiterating some of the things that we mentioned earlier, but working with over 90 counties, 74 of which are considered rural, 35 considered at risk or distressed, over 600 high schools, over 60 colleges. The bottom line there is showing you the breakdown of students that are Tennessee Promise eligible and where they're going. So if they remain eligible for Promise, the schools that they're usually going to for their first semester is 8 out of 10 are going to a community college, with the other 20% being split between eligible four-year universities and the Tennessee College of Applied Technologies. Those numbers are obviously statewide, so they will vary from county to county, and counties that are closer to the TCATs generally have a little bit higher percentage going that way. Continuing to look at statewide numbers, we can see the vast majority of students that Tennessee Achieves is working with. So in those 90 counties, Tennessee Achieves is annually getting about 60,000 new students. We are anticipating with the class of 2022 that we'll have, again, around 60,000 plus students. A couple of years ago, we had our highest group, and that was 64,000. So that kind of gives you a ballpark number of every year how many students we're working with. Of those students that are starting that apply for Tennessee Promise, they make up almost 90% of the seniors across the state. So almost 9 out of 10 seniors are applying for Tennessee Promise and then being enrolled in Tennessee Achieves. The other 9 or 10 to 11% are students that are in those heirs counties or students that have not applied for Tennessee Promise. The 78% and 86% number that you'll see on that top line, they are representative of students that have either applied for Tennessee Promise and then gone to a community college as a first-time full-time freshman, or students that have applied and then eventually graduated from a community college. So in both cases, there are students that have applied for Tennessee Promise. They've gone through the Tennessee Achieves program. They've gotten the communication from us. They've gotten the volunteer mentor. They've gotten job shadow opportunities. They've gotten all of what, as a partnering organization, we're able to provide them. And those numbers are reflective of, the vast majority of successful college students. So basically, if we're being successful, we're in turn seeing some results at the community colleges as well. The middle line is going to show you just some facts that we've kind of seen, that of the annual number of seniors we get each year, over half of them are going to be eligible for federal financial aid, which means they're going to receive some sort of Pell Grant. This is just important because the FAFSA is, the pre-application for federal student aid is a requirement. And even if a student doesn't end up being promised eligible at the end of this, that FAFSA can also be their application for things like the Hope Scholarship and for that federal grant money, in addition to the state funding like Tennessee Promise. The 40% number you see is related to first-generation students. This is self-reported, so I would take it with a grain of salt, but know that this is what students are reporting when they are applying for Tennessee Promise. And that 51% is the majors that students are entering when they are entering school as Promise eligible students, so either in the health science field or in the STEM-related fields. And the bottom line there is just showing you the operating costs, not only for the state when it comes to paying for Tennessee Promise, but also the operating costs for our organization for working with over 60,000 high school seniors, usually about 30,000 college students over the course of those 90 counties. All right, so now some of the nitty-gritty stuff that you probably came for, which are county-specific numbers. On this particular page, you're going to see the FAFSA filing rate, both for the county as well as the statewide number. You're also going to see the number of community service hours done statewide as well as by Macon County. So if we focus on that FAFSA filing rate, you'll see that statewide we were at 86% and Macon County was at 84% for this past cohort. Both those numbers are a little bit down, and the reason why we do believe that is obviously because of the COVID year that we've all experienced. We saw numbers go down in a couple of different areas, and it's pretty much kind of that COVID bump. But although they did go down a little bit, they're still at a very high level. We're still leading the country when it comes to FAFSA filing rate. And so we are just kind of getting our mindset on what can we do to make sure we're getting that number back up to the 90% plus that we're accustomed to seeing year after year. If we look at the community service hours, you'll see that Macon County alone has submitted almost 13,000 hours of community service in the time frame that they've been Tennessee Promise eligible. Of those 13,000 almost, they've contributed to almost 3.4 million community service hours. As I mentioned at the beginning, community service is a really big component of our program, and it's important that students are being able to give back. So our hope is that in your county, you're hopefully seeing this being done at the organizations these students are working with, whether it be the schools, the nonprofits, local government, whatever it may be. We're hoping that you're seeing some of these hours done because it is a really cool thing to see how much the students have been giving back over the course of being eligible. If we continue to look forward, we can see what it looks like for a particular cohort when it comes to student progress. So once again, you'll see a comparison between Macon County and statewide numbers, and these numbers are representative from the cohort of 2019. So the class of 2019, you're going to see the number of applicants, which a reminder is about almost usually 90% of students on a statewide level. You'll see the number of students who enrolled as Tennessee Promise eligible, and then you're also going to see the first year retention rate. The bottom line that you'll see there is a 3-year graduation rate for the county and the state, but it's only going to look for the class of 2017. So I just want to point that out. If we look at the comparison, we'll see that Macon County is actually outpacing the statewide numbers in both first-year retention rate and 3-year graduation rate, and that's a really awesome thing to see, because as we know, every student that applies for Tennessee Promise is not going to necessarily use Tennessee Promise. They may have a bad plan B, plan C of going out of state or to a school possibly like UT or MTSU or other non-Promise eligible school. So of those 99 that started with Tennessee Promise from Macon County in the class of 19, 71% of them were retaining. So almost 70 out of 100 were retaining from year 1 to year 2, compared to the statewide average of 67%. And if we look at the class of 17, of the number of students that started as Tennessee Promise eligible, they're graduating at a 47% rate. So almost 1 out of every 2 students were graduating within 3 years, compared to the statewide average of 35%. Those numbers, albeit it's great that Macon County is above them, we know that we're not satisfied with just those numbers. So because of that, we have focused a lot of our attention on retention rates. How can we make sure that when we're getting the student to school, that we're able to keep them and get them to eventually graduate with a credential, whether it's being from the local community college, whether it's from the nearby Tennessee College of Applied Technology, or if it's from one of the eligible 4-year universities. These outcomes here are going to show you kind of the statewide averages of just the student that may start at a community college versus students that have gone through the tnAchieves program at the very least. So you'll see in retention, annually about 53% of the full-time for full-time first-time freshmen at a community college, they're retaining at 53%, which is lower than that 67% number I just showed you, which was also lower than the Macon County number. That 67% number is looking at just students that went through the tnAchieves program and then enrolled at a participating institution. So that could have been something like TCAT, Hartsville, or one of the volunteer state community colleges. That 74% number is taking another step back and looking at just students that applied for Tennessee Promise and went to a school anywhere. So that could have been out of state or a non-promise institution. They're retaining at a 74% rate. So by the very least of going through the tnAchieves program, getting that volunteer mentor, getting those opportunities and that communication, they're retaining at a better average than the regular community college student. If we look at the graduation rate, we're also seeing an increase in students that have gone through the tnAchieves program at an increase of 16%. Those students are graduating, so almost 1 out of 2 are graduating within 6 years. So just something to keep in mind, kind of show why we are very passionate about the things that we do and why we think that they do make an impact. But we understand that our job's not done. We're still trying to improve those numbers every year. On the far right corner, you'll see, or the right side, those initiatives that I talked about earlier, things like summer programs, the complete program. Both of those have shown that the cohorts for each of those are retaining at a higher percentage than that normal rate of 34 and 23%. And then the Knox Promise program, which is currently in Knox County, is having an increase of almost 42% based off of the average level. Knox Promise, just to give you a little bit of feedback, is a program that is similar to Complete, but instead of only the low-income students getting a coach, every student in Knox County is also being paired up with a coach there. So they're getting that support system, as well as being able to apply for what are called completion grants. Completion grants are things that students that can show documentation that they need assistance with things like food insecurities, transportation costs, books and materials, things that would otherwise be speed bumps. Students in Knox County are able to apply for that. So our hope is that because we're seeing such positive results there, that this will be a proof point that we can then expand that program to a statewide level, so that regardless of county, if a student is a low-income student, they will be able to have access to these completion grants, which can hopefully also help make some of that impact when it comes to retention and graduation rates. The next slide is going to show us the college going rate. So you'll see left side is the statewide going rate. The right side is going to show you the last 2 years for Macon County. And if we look at the statewide level, you'll see that it pretty much was stable for a while, and then it jumps by 4.6% in 2015. That happens to coincide when Tennessee Promise went into effect. That increase was more than the previous 7 years combined, and then it kind of stayed there for the next 4 or 5 years. But then 2020 happened, and of course, kind of with COVID and the pandemic, it kind of reared its ugly head, and we see a drop in the college going rate. If we look at Macon County from 2019 to 2020, there was also a drop of about 5.5%. We're aware of this. I know all the community colleges are aware of this, all the TCATs, the 4 universities. This is something that's, it was an across the board issue that we saw. We are trying to figure out best ways to kind of combat that and work with our partners, whether it be the schools in the different school systems across the state, the colleges across the state. How can we make this be to where we can get these back into the 60s where it's been for the last few years, if not continue to improve on it? And so by racking our brains, by presenting this information to the local advisory council and for whoever may watch this, we understand that the biggest way we can have that impact is in that kind of divide over the summertime. And that's where the mentors come into play the most. As you can see on your screen, for Macon County, we need 330 mentors to be able to pair up with the amount of seniors that we normally amount for there. The application to be a mentor has already opened up, and so it's open to new mentors or returning mentors. I checked this morning and we already had 2 returners sign up, so really that 33 number is 31. So as a local advisory council, if we can spread the news about what it's like to mentor from either our past experience or why it can be impactful on things like the numbers I just showed, that's really what we're asking for from this particular group. The idea of being a mentor has not changed. They are still going to be considered a task manager, so somebody who's reminding them about deadlines or just things that need to get done. That'll kind of be combated or combined with tnAchieves. We're asking them to be the resource. So again, somebody that just a student or a family can turn to if they have a question. The mentors don't need to know the answer to that question, but at least be able to point them in the right direction of at least our staff, and then be able to be an encourager. So somebody that can just tell them that they can do this if this is something that they want to do. I think for all of us, with what the last year and a half has looked like, we could all use our own personal encourager, but especially for our current high school seniors, is going to be really important because they kind of lost their junior year of high school. And with the upcoming senior year, which we kind of know is in this weird sort of what is going to look like, it's also going to be very different. And so they may not be around the school staff like they normally would. They may not be doing the same sort of things that prepare them for what life is like after high school. And so being a mentor, you can kind of help fill that void. So we really want to just get the word out on that. Mentors will continue to be able to call, text, and email. They'll be able to use that new virtual platform that we introduced this past year, which was called tnAchieves Connect. As a reminder, that platform basically allows mentors to log in one place and then see all of their students in one place, be able to message them at the same time, and then be able to set up virtual calls or phone calls there, as well as be able to see information about each student on those profiles. In addition to that, we are also going to kind of encourage mentors that if they'd like, they can try to get together in a group setting. Our chairman, Randy Boyd, he usually gets his group of students and they will get pizza together. So if you feel comfortable doing something like that, by all means, it's something we've never encouraged in the past, but if you'd like to do that, you can do that. And we're also going to host open houses. So with our local college partners, we're going to try to set up meeting dates and times where mentors can just invite their students to show up. There'll be no formal presentation, but just a chance to kind of get to know each other in person if they'd like. And at those open houses, there'll be a Tennessee Achieves staff member, as well as a college staff member from that local college. So they can kind of get to know each other. And then if they have specific questions, they'll have resources available at that open house. And the reason why we're doing that is because 2/3 of our mentors that were surveyed said that they would like to have some sort of opportunity for in-person, since we're not going to be doing those big gymnasium or cafeteria meetings that we used to do. So I kind of already addressed the first big next step is just becoming a mentor if you haven't already. But the second thing is just spreading that word. So if you have a listserv, if you have a group of friends or family that you would like to kind of send communication out to, by all means do it. If you would like information from us specifically, you can let myself know, or you'll see the mentors email down there, our outreach team. They will get you either PowerPoints or flyers, social media images, whatever it is that you would like to kind of send out. We can get those to you that are already prepared. And the other thing is, if you're part of kind of a local organization, whether it's the Chamber, the Rotary Club, Lions Club, Kiwanis, whatever sort of organization that is looking for things to do, if they want to hear this sort of pitch in person, we'll be there. You just give us that information, we'll reach out and we'll figure out a date and time where we can come speak to that group. So really just being vocal about what it's like to be a mentor and what you would need from us to make it easier for you. And the last thing is just advocating to the class of 2022, or just letting the community know that the Tennessee Promise application is open. It's been open since the beginning of the month. And so for that class of 2022, we want to try to make sure as many as possible are signing up. We didn't get a chance to be in front of the class of 2021 due to the past year. So we do think that some students just didn't ever apply. And we want to make sure at the very least that students are applying and being kind of enrolled in the Tennessee Achieves program, because as we've seen from the data presented here today, that they're at a much higher rate to be retaining as well as graduating, regardless if they end up using Promise their first semester. So it's a lot of information. This is my contact info. So once again, my name is Matthew. But at this time, is there anything that I can help answer for either you, Steve, or you, Rebecca?